As much as I hated to admit it growing up, I've always had a soft spot for the Twilight franchise. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things I take issue with in this series, but to this day I'm still fascinated by the world building and lore of Twilight. There's a lot about this series that I can and will ramble about here, that's a threat. But for this video, I'm focusing on how enhancing the traits the characters already have improves the overall story of Twilight. With some stories, even minor changes can make a world of difference. Before I start on that though, no, it's not a sponsor. I've got to nerd about the supernatural lore. I need to. I was never into the romance portions of the book, cause, you know, so the lore is what I focused on. This mindset low-key bleeds into how I go about the rest of the video, just so you know. 1. Renesmee is a Dhampir, half human, half vampire. Not enough stories have Dhampirs, so this was fun when it was explored a bit. Speaking of Renesmee, I don't think it's a terrible name. I remember having a harder time pronouncing Carlisle's name than I did with Renesmee.
Carlisle?
I find the process of naming characters to be really interesting, and I love that Bella just took the name smashing route. It's fun. 2. The thing about the vampires having unique powers was also a neat touch. This contributes to the vampires being OP, but I'll get to that later. 3. The Volturi are a cool idea, and a society like the Volturi makes a lot of sense being in this world. Also, I love movie Aro. Maybe that's because I headcanon him as Aromantic. 4. Apparently Jacob's dad, Billy Black, never turned into a werewolf because there weren't any vampires around when he was a teen. It's just a really cool idea to me that werewolves exist as a response to vampires. 5. According to the Midnight Sun book, Edward has difficulty hearing Charlie's thoughts because they're kind of muted. Renee's thoughts are super loud though. She can just project her wants onto other people. Kinda interesting how Bella's vampire powers turned out. 6. I also really latched onto the idea of some vampires drinking animal blood instead of human blood. I know a lot of monster stories cast the character's monster side as completely evil, but not every supernatural creature has to be evil, you know? They may no longer be human, but they're still people. I bet many would probably love to keep their human morals. 7. Everyone thinks the sparkly vampire thing is dumb, and I mean I can see why, but I mean come on, it's a super unique take on vampire lore. And I see it as another way to draw and prey. Shiny hot people are bound to be at least a few people's aesthetic. Okay, here's something I'd change about the vampires though. Twilight's vamps are very overpowered. Their skin is, you could say, supernaturally hard. Garlic and sunlight don't bother them, they have superpowers and super senses, and why are all of them conventionally attractive? Kind of their only weakness is a thirst for blood, and in some characters like Carlisle and Bella, that's not even a problem anymore. There's not as many checks and balances here, which, in my opinion, is one of the best parts of character design. And I get that that's the point, it's a power fantasy with a bit of supernatural spice, but it was kind of a letdown for me lore-wise. In order to make edits, we first need to understand who these characters are. I'm just going to deal with Edward and Bella though, because if I critiqued everyone, I'd probably be here all day. I wouldn't be changing Alice or Carlisle anyway though, because they were already queens. Bella's personality. She doesn't have one. Just kidding, that's what I would say if I was a stupid sheep that had no media literacy. A lot of people think Bella doesn't have a personality. Here's all the reasons that I could think of. In the books, Bella is very internal and narrates a lot of her thoughts to us. The movie then immediately took out all of her internal dialogue. This made movie Bella feel way more flat. Another explanation, both of her parents parentify her and influence her to take care of everything around the house, including paying the bills. Renee's especially bad at this and is codependent with Bella, but Charlie's no saint either. Parentification sometimes causes children to feel like their only identity is tied up with what others want and need. This also explains how Bella constantly feels the need to help others and enjoys being needed. Her selflessness, in part, is because of her upbringing. In fact, it's so ingrained into her that in the first book she mentions in her own words that, "I wasn't used to being taken care of." Hot take, Bella has no personality is kind of a misogynist interpretation. I see a troubling pattern where girls in stories are criticized if they act at all like a girl. Girls who act like stereotypical dudes tend to get praised, at least in the 2010s, as progressive and strong females, while if your dream is to have a husband and children, you're not living up to your full potential or some other dumb crap. Like, so what if she has a massive crush and lets herself be vulnerable? So what if she got depression after her boyfriend left? So what if she's like other girls? Does she have to act like a guy to be a good character? Because some of you seem to think that she does. Just like girls be girls, whatever form that takes. And finally, relatability. Bella does seem to be a bit basic to try and be a little more relatable. People even say that she's a self-insert character with fewer traits of her own so that readers can sort of put themselves into her shoes. Okay, confession time. I wrote that little section in about her being a self-insert, but now I'm starting to question the validity of that concept in the first place. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Unless a character literally never moves or speaks, characters will always show their personality. Being passive is a personality trait, so is being quiet or a pushover. The point is, I'm just not sure if it's even useful to call Bella a self-insert for the reader if she's clearly her own person. Speaking of which, here's the thing, Bella's not devoid of personality. For one thing, she's very introspective and vulnerable. She loves people intensely and cares about and for others. She takes responsibility for things she shouldn't. Bella loves reading romance books and longs for a romance of her own. That's not nothing. Bella also reads as a neurodivergent person. Pause to read the screen for specifics if you're interested. I got a whole conspiracy board up in here, so. She's got plenty of flaws too. She frequently has very negative thoughts, especially towards others. There are some people she despises, and I think even fantasizes about hurting on occasion. It's kind of funny how she hangs out with Jessica and Mike so often, because I always got the vibe that she couldn't stand being around them. I think one thing that turned a lot of people off is their passivity. She just kind of floats through life in most of the books, never really standing up for herself except in certain situations. This trait can absolutely exist in characters, but total passivity needs to be recognized as a flaw to be overcome. And now we're on to Edward's characterization. Edward has all the traits that come with being a Twilight vampire, including his special superpower, mind reading. He uses this to his advantage when he can. He's also the fastest Cullen. Despite his gifts though, he hates that he's a vampire and wishes he could be more human. Like Bella, people are low-key drawn to him, despite him hating people with a passion. He's also very introspective and cares about protecting and providing for others. Unlike Bella though, Ed is determined and stubborn to a fault. He takes a very active role in the story. When he's on his best behavior, Edward can be charming and intelligent and enjoys learning about people. He's the kind of guy who never runs out of get-to-know-you questions. He also likes playing piano and has the capacity for intelligent and thoughtful conversations with Bella. Edward also cares deeply about his moral values. Although it's very difficult for him, he doesn't kill humans, at least not anymore, and wants to remain celibate until after marriage. As for his flaws, he has fairly poor impulse control, especially when it comes to Bella. And when I was rereading Twilight this year, it struck me by just how utterly infuriating he is. He constantly talks down to Bella and insults her and even finds a cruel joy in it. He's also easily angered and always feels superior to others. How is anyone supposed to like him when he's like this? Also, as you might have noticed, he's creepy and manipulative. Normal people don't stalk their crush, or watch them sleep, or break their truck so they can't visit people, or control their every move. This creepiness wasn't really treated as a flaw though. Bella actually thinks it's romantic sometimes. Now that we know who Bella and Edward are, what do we do with that? Most characters are going to have random little traits and quirks. Sometimes they're just little fun facts that have no bearing on the plot, and sometimes they secretly inform everything a character does. If Stephanie Meyer had integrated some of these personality traits differently, I think it could have made for a better story. After all, when something isn't working, you can either cut it out entirely, or change it to fit your needs better. I call this reintegration. There's probably an actual word for it, but I don't know what it is, so we're calling it reintegration. In the original books, Bella longs to be a vampire. She doesn't connect with others, despite people wanting to interact with her for some reason. She's pasty white despite being Arizonian, and is a hopeless romantic. She has a need to be wanted and loved, and she thrives off that feeling. As I mentioned before, I also see hints at her being neurodivergent. This is all stuff that's canon to Bella. A lot of these traits I just named aren't really connected, but let's try connecting or reworking them a bit. In my hypothetical rewrite, Bella isn't randomly popular despite hating half the people at school. Instead, she's the weird, awkward, pale-skinned new kid with an obsession for the supernatural. Vampires and werewolves are all she talks about, and once the hype of her new girl status wears off, this pushes people away. Bella struggles to find a place to sit at lunch for a couple weeks, until the Cullen kids, the other outcasts, invite her to the table. Edward is still weird about her desirable blood and tries to keep his distance for a while, but Alice and maybe also Jasper become fast friends with Bella. Bella soon learns the Cullen secret, and this fuels her current worldview. The only way that she can find love and belonging is to abandon her humanity and become a vampire. It's a fairly small tweak, but it changes a lot. I think the first book's arc would be about learning to accept her humanity and stop glamorizing the supernatural. For example, in the final battle scene where Bella gets bitten by James the vampire, Bella has a choice. Become a vampire like she always dreamed, or remain a human. She chooses to stay human, and the book continues basically like normal. In future books, I'd continue exploring this question from different angles. Maybe she backtracks at some points and she questions her decision to remain human. By the end, though, Bella has grown to love herself as a human, so by breaking dawn, she can truly love herself and others as a vampire too. Another thing I'd address about her character is her passivity. Like I mentioned before, passive characters aren't inherently bad, they usually just need to learn to be more active. Throughout the series, I would explore the reasons why Bella is so against making decisions and sharing opinions, and let her learn to stand up for herself more. Like for an example, maybe Bella lets people walk all over her because she thinks they'll leave if she stands up to them. Perhaps Bella believes that the moment she puts her foot down is the moment her loved ones decide that she's not worth having around. Bella needs to set boundaries, especially with the men in her life. Her romantic interests treat her like a child with no agency, and Bella also treats her own father like a child. Let the grown man cook for himself, dang it! Now we're on to reintegrating Edward. Let's address Eddie's toxic traits in more detail. You could just get rid of them, or you could do the more interesting thing and call him out for his behavior. The way a character is framed or presented in the story directly influences how they're seen. If you want to show that Edward's actions are wrong, here's a couple options. 1. Have the characters think or say that the action is bad. Maybe a character gives Eddie the side eye, or they act more aggressively towards him when he's being creepy. Or number 2, let the narrator present the action as bad. As a writer, you have the freedom to pick what you mention and how you describe it. For example, a cottage in the forest is a lot less sinister than a cabin in the woods. In my edit, I want to add more context to his toxic side. Being a century old, he's a little out of touch with his humanity, and he assumes his behavior is normal. And maybe he seems normal and charming at first, but the more the kids at school get to know him, the more off he seems. Bella kind of blindly accepts this at first. She's willing to take love wherever she gets it, and romanticizes his presence in her life. But then she gets to know him better and eventually realizes that he doesn't have the most healthy behavior. Maybe she brushes all of the red flags away until it's revealed that he watches her sleep at night, and then she rightfully becomes a little freaked out. In essence, here's Bella's place in Edward's arc. Bella helps him get back in touch with his humanity again by learning to be less creepy and controlling. He can't change everything, and he shouldn't try to change Bella. This will also help Bella on her journey to learn to make her own choices. As a parallel to Bella, I'd also lean more into Edward's self-loathing, and to help him learn to love his vampire side more. While Bella is a human idealizing vampirism, Edward is a vampire idealizing humanism. This technique of reintegration can also work for plot points. To give one example, imprinting! This would have worked much better if the author had actually delivered on the imprinting can be whatever you want it to be thing. All of the examples we get either end up as current or future romances, which I hope you can see just how wrong that is. Jacob imprinting on a baby would probably have worked more if Jake was like, I'm your father now, and tried to kidnap the baby to raise it himself or something. And since imprinting works both ways in this story, baby Renesmee is like, you're my dad now!
Wookie, wookie, wookie.
So essentially, I'm demoting Jacob from daddy to dad. This would have kept the conflict between Bella and Jacob over Renesmee without the implications being so gross. And it also avoids this line from Edward. This is a real line in the books. Goodbye, Jacob. My brother. My son. Theme. If you've ever been held hostage by me on a random street corner at 2:10 a.m. while I ramble about writing, you knew this was coming. The most important characterization should be inherently linked to the theme of the story. The original Twilight Saga explores a few main conflicts: love versus lust, choice versus anti-choice, and alienation versus belonging. Usually I'm wary of stories trying to tackle this many different conflicts at once. Oh, don't worry, I'll get to you soon. But since it's a multi-book series, I'm giving it a little more leeway. In a series, each book usually explores a different conflict, while the series as a whole tackles the theme. I think both Bella and Edward struggle with the choice versus anti-choice conflict the most. Bella feels too passive in the beginning, often bending to the will of others instead of doing what she wants to do. Edward is incredibly controlling, and thinks he knows Bella's needs better than she knows them herself. These two characters should butt heads when it comes to their ideologies. But over time, as their love for each other grows, Bella learns to stand up for herself and choose her own path, and Edward learns when he needs to take the backseat and trust others' opinions. As a whole, though, I would also want to explore more of the alienation versus belonging aspect of the series. The feeling that you don't belong in your own social circle is always something that's resonated with me. I don't really look physically different from other people, but because I'm neurodivergent and queer and disabled, people can just tell that I'm different. It feels like there's an invisible wall blocking you from everyone else, preventing you from truly connecting with others. Friends can be hard to come by, and even harder to trust. Especially when everyone keeps saying little things that make you feel like an other, like you're a them and not an us. Pretty soon, that might give you the wrong idea of who you should be. You might start to think that if you became funnier, more extroverted, less weird, you'll finally belong. And so you squeeze and pull at your identity until you've molded yourself into the perfect person. But for better or for worse, you are still you, and you will always be unsuccessful in being just like the others. So hey, if people are always going to insist on seeing you as the other, why should you bother fitting in? If I were to rewrite the series, I think I'd explore how agency and choice play a part in someone's identity. This would be my thematic question for the series. Can Bella find belonging by deciding who she wants to be, or will she only find companionship by being what others want from her? There's so much that I absolutely adore about the Twilight Saga. After all, it was one of the first stories that ignited my love for supernatural folklore. And because of my love for the series, I'm a strong advocate for finding ways to improve it. Through the technique of reintegration, I've been able to improve my own stories as well. I've learned that when something isn't quite working on a character level, try looking at it from a different angle. Take some of those loose threads and random character traits and try connecting them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes, you just gotta add a couple more spokes. And enter bloopers. He always seemed a little fruity to me, but that's just a theory. Okay, theory. I'm sorry, Matt Pat. I can't mimic your voice. Like, I love that in this world, vampires. You can tell I'm going off script because I say a million times. Shiny pot people. And let's be honest, not enough people talk about how revolutionary that. Why is there bugs? Okay. Oh, no. There's a bug. Get out of my towel. Her selflessness. I can't say it. Her selflessness is in part because of her upbringing. Her selflessness is like, whoa, I actually said it right, and then I paused, and then I ruined the take. Okay, it's fine. Her selfness. Okay. No, not the bug again. Why are you back? Get out of here. Oh, thank you. I have murdered the fly. I have bested the fly. We are done with the fly saga. Okay. Really interesting, and I love that Bella just took the name rashing spout. Gosh, good luck editing this, future me. Belsa. Yep. Let it go, Edward. Unlike Bella, though, Ed is disturbed. Disturbed, more like. I was never into the romance portions of the book because, so the lore is what I focused on. What? Why do I write sentences like this? Where Bella gets bitten by James the vampire. I don't know why I needed to specify that he was a vampire, but yeah, anyway. This would have kept the conflict between Jella and Jacob. After all, it was one of the first stories that ignited my love for supernatural folklore. Take some of those loose threads. Okay, I think we're finally done. Yeah! Woohoo!